So I hope that the technique works. Hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm very pleased being invited here on this nice little workshop. Even though, as I wrote the program, I felt a bit alien because I'm not going to talk about Middle or Late Bronze Age. I'm holding this speech here on behalf also of Clemens Schmid, who contributed a lot here on all this statistic evaluation together with other students from the University of Tübingen, Jonas Abele and David Kirschenreuter, as well as Bernie Weniger. We work together. So as most of you might know, the Varna graveyard, let me just put a few words here at the beginning. So indeed, as the finds came out by accident in 1971 in an industrial zone at the west of the Bulgarian harbor town, the scientific world was absolutely surprised, and nobody could imagine that these finds are belonging to a Neolithic age. So, and indeed, they were firstly connected with the Ur graves or Uruk cemetery in the Near East. And then very soon, the Bulgarians at that time were very quick. They cooperated with the East German radiocarbon lab of Gersdorf. And then as it was getting clear that they belonged to the 5th millennium BCE, it was like a shock. Yeah, so no one could imagine that such a tremendous amount of gold. So we are speaking here about 3,000 single gold items and a tremendous amount of heavy copper tools already appear here in Europe in such an early state. Until today, the Varna cemetery and another small grave group, the Varna II grave group, is considered to be the oldest evidence for extractive gold metallurgy in the world. So I'm going, or we are going to speak here with Clemens about these aspects. Here you can see. So I will first introduce how we created the database. Then I would like to focus a bit on the spatial distribution of the finds, because it's very telling also in terms of horizontal stratigraphy. Then we come to the multivariate statistics, and then we put the C-coordinator to the statistics, and we achieve a chronological modeling. And the consequences could fill a whole series of lectures, but I will focus just on a few according to, what does that mean in development of artifacts within this period. We see here in the necropolis, and then maybe some words about the recent investigations on genetics. So the Varna cemetery provides us 316 graves.
It's not
okay.
For the change of slide. If it's possible in PDF, I will transform it in PDF. It's pretty possible, because online they didn't.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry for the animation.
Yes.
Okay. The technical bits of this are not great.
Where are
They're actually speaking up at the museum there.
Okay.
I stopped my speech because the colleague is going to transform the presentation into PDF that you can see it online.
Chris, can you please mute yourself?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Yes,
It's
okay. Okay, so we have created a database. So these 316 any mouse? Oh yeah, I can use this. Rows represent the graves, so they are not only real graves in terms of burials, but also symbolic, so-called symbolic graves, which have the same size like a grave, but do not contain a skeleton, and depositions which are purely material depositions. They're very special. And in these 193 columns, we have here several aspects of the graves, which I will present in brief. So first of all, we have here different kind of burial positions. This classification was taken from the work of the colleagues on the graveyard of Durankulak, which overlaps in its later phases with the cemetery of Varna, a work mainly done by Henrietta Todorova and her colleagues. And the anthropological data were initially worked from this colleague here, Dr. Yordanov from the Institute in Sofia for anthropology at the Bulgarian Academy of Science. And the other colleague you can see here is Steve Zoyner from the Tübingen University. So you see here, there were some basic positions of arms, legs, burials, crouch positions, hawker graves, or supine. And then it came also into discussion the orientation of the graves. You can see here the depth of the grave. And then that was at the time being the sex determination, which was sometimes secure. It's written here deutlich, weiblich, männlich, which means clear, male, female, and then in brackets here if it's not that sure, and also an age clustering here below 16, and then these age groups. So according the bone preservation, I have to say a few words. You see here two graves, grave number 7 and the richest grave number 43, and there you can see the difference in the bone preservation. And that was really a surprise for us to see. In very, very high number of graves, there was almost no preserved bones in it. And in others, we had a good bone preservation. And it was an observation from Steve Zoyner that he made a correlation that the graves with lots of metal implements have a good bone preservation. And that is a taphonomic factor because the oxidized metal functions as an antibiotic. And so it came that the bone preservation, especially here, you see it here at the legs, where all these copper items are very well preserved, the bones. And in rest here, you see it dissolved through time. So the soil is very aggressive. So in graves where we have none or almost non-metal finds, we have a pure bone preservation, and the others are well preserved. And this is an effect we cannot ignore for further analysis, because we have good anthropological data only from the graves where we have metal in. So then we classified the copper items from big tools. Here you can see heavy implements through smaller ones, and then lots of jewelry made of copper. The same we did then with the gold items. There are a few bigger gold items, for instance, this big breast plates, but most of them are much smaller, sometimes only small rings or ring idols, or some applications which we think they were put on clothes as adornment. A big topic are the mollusks in Varna. We have several finds made of Spondylus, Gederopus, an oyster. There was a big discussion going on if these species at that time were living in the Black Sea or not. There's rather a tendency nowadays to see that they are not part of the faunal spectrum in the Black Sea, so they were transported from the Aegean. And the same you can say for the dentalium shells and for a few others. And these are beads here of carnelian. This could be seen as a local resource. And then we have lots of, that's here in German written, Muschelschalen ohne Ordnung. That means snail or helix shells, which are not distributed in a grave, like they were arranged in a kind of a bracelet or adornment. So they could be even intrusive. Then from the bone implements, we have a few idols. Many of them look like they were used for a longer time before they came into the grave context. And then we have this big idols, few, I think they are also anthropomorphic. Sven Hansen sees them as phallic representations. Anyway, we have them mainly made from cattle long bones, but there is at least one example where such a bone idol is imitated in marble. Then another criterion which we put into the database is the presence of ochre in the graves. Here you see in the new Varna exhibition, they have here put in some samples, and this is graphite, which was used to paint pottery. And here you have one image of one of the excavation documentation, how one of these symbolic graves, grave number 5, look like. We have here a clay hat with a lot of golden stuff on it, and then here where the body should be, we see that ochre on the grave bottom. With the typology of the pottery, it was not that easy because it's a specificum of Varna. In the time we are talking about the middle of the 5th millennium, we have an excellent pottery production. Actually, we know from several tell sites, Poljanica, Guglielmo d'Elcevo, the production, which is splendid. But specifically in Varna, it seems to be the case that the pottery was produced only for the grave ritual, and people were not spending much effort on baking the pottery properly. So in most of the cases, the pots were dissolved through time. So we are dealing here with tiny little fragments. Nevertheless, some parts of the vessels, for instance, this pot stands here with this horn-like protuberances here, are very specific and could be function here as criteria. And here you see other vessels where we have some parts of them which could be distinguished and put here into a kind of an order. But the pottery was a problem till the end. Comparatively easy, we could deal with the stone implements, the grinded stone implements. We have battle axes, very bright ones with shafting holes, and then simple ones, and there's also a miniature axe. With a flint production, we step here on shoulders of giants. So there was a tremendous work done before, especially from Laurence Manoulakakis, on working with this excellent material. We have very, very long blades, so-called super blades. The specialists agree on that it's only pressure technique which you can use to produce these long blades. And Jacques Pellegrin experimented with several machines, let's say, to produce these items. And there's a specific a lever installation where he could produce such long blades from also Varna flint, but also Grand Pressigny flintstone. And on the other hand, we have not only these long blades where the use is enigmatic, so they might have been used only as a symbolic items in the graves, just to show what was possible at the time, till 0.5 meter long blades, but also we have these points here for projectiles, which are very nicely retouched from both sides. Yeah. The Tübingen Varna project consisted mainly on two aspects. Both were worked with two dissertations. The one could be finished here from Verena Leusch on the gold items. She did lots of analysis with laser spectrometry to find out something about gold distributions, the location, where does the gold come from. It is alluvial gold, that it's obvious it's not mined gold like in later times, which makes it a bit more complicated because we have several bags from river systems, which then were put together, all these nuggets or gold sand, and then melted. But there are some platinum group elements within the melted gold which could not melt, and they could be measured directly. And it is clear that we do not have to search for sources for the gold outside of the region. So there are many gold-bearing rivers, and the signature fits perfectly to that. So what we see here in this graph is the distribution of gold within the graves. And put into this graph are only graves with more than 2 gold items, because otherwise it would be too long. And here you see the numbers. And it's obvious here that we have few graves which contain a lot of gold items, up to 1003. Single gold items in the grave, 43. And in the symbolic complex or deposition 36, they are up to 860. So it's not very evenly distributed, the gold in the graves. So you see here more than 2/4 of all the gold items, all the 3000 in the Varna cemeteries, are mainly part of these two complexes, one symbolic and one real grave. But gold is part of the ritual, as we can see here in these other graves. It is there. So then Clemens made here a distribution of the gold, where you can see here specific items, how often or seldom they are represented. He makes some box plots here that you get an impression about the distribution. And I'm telling that because I can hold a speech also on the social implications of all these things, but the main focus here should be on chronology. And this is something which makes a problem if we are talking here not only about presence, absence, things, but also the number of items in the graves is very, very diverse. So the distribution of the gold within the graves. So here we have a simplified map of the distribution of the graves, and you see here the depth of the graves, giving here in colors. So light yellow is a very shallow grave pit till 42 centimeters, and the blue ones are the deepest, even sometimes over 2 meters depth. And you can see here there is a correlation. The deeper the graves are, the richer in gold. And there's also another thing we can see here in this mapping. The richest gold graves concentrate here in a zone in the southeast of the cemetery, which we will come back very soon. So now, looking on the copper items, they are more or less evenly distributed here in the graveyard. But for me, it was very interesting at the beginning to see that they're forming some lines here, yeah, of copper-rich graves here, here, and here. And so we have to take into consideration also the topography of the site. I extracted here one slide because of the time. So we have to know that the Theran is sloping here towards the Varna lake, which is situated more or less here. And here it goes up. So this is high position. And here these lines follow more or less the slope of the Theran. So with all the things we put into this table, you saw those 316 rows, and then all these aspects, grave position, grave goods, etc. We created a first seriation, and then very soon also a correspondence analysis. And that's why I was asking Tiziano if he filtered his data set or not, because our looked at the beginning this way, yeah. And it's obvious because you saw the big difference in graves where we have 100 of gold items, or graves where we have only one piece or no gold items. That is influencing here. There's not only chronology in it, there's also social implications and others, age groups, also the gender aspect influences here. I have a special graph on that. And we have special items which appear mainly in male graves, other ones which are specific for females. All this is coming into that, and that's why we had to deal somehow with this problem. And what we have done then was a very complex algorithm. So, but in the first step, we reduced the data set on presence-absence relations to get a binary data set. And that was very important because with that, we could then achieve something which we could interpret in a way chronologically. So you see here one of the first results of this filtering only with the binarization of the data set, and then extracting several graves which we could see as true runners. A few of them even could not be fitted here into that time span we were interested, because they were also appearing Bronze Age graves. And if you do so, you see here we got a very nicely kind of horseshoe graph. And here, this is a plot where you can see only grave items on it. So we can do the same and order here the grave numbers. Yeah, so this is interesting. So, and then we the problem is always which is the ancient arm here of the calibration of the correspondence analysis, and which is the younger one. And therefore we use the Varna 2 grave group, which typologically here from the pottery, but also from these items, are seen as the forerunner of the real Varna graveyard. It's situated 4 kilometers to the west of that place. Yeah, and if you put those graves into our seriation, we could distinguish, and you can see here, this should be the older arm, and these are the younger graves. Yeah. Okay, what Clemens then has done is putting the graph. Here we optically find out here some gaps in the CA defined here, or phase boundaries. And then I was very amazed that I saw the same graph used here by Tiziano. So they are actually, I do not have to repeat this. We can just project here factor 1 in ordering the graves. So these are C14 dated graves, and here from all these phases, or we can go along the curve, and that is the same methodology which Tiziano formulated as a polynomial fitting of the graves. So, and then you see here also the distribution of the graves within these phases. here you see the gaps. And even if you use statistical methods, that comes out more or less the same. Then we used Bernie's Gauss Monte Carlo wiggle matching algorithm to find out here a best fit. And as a result, we have here a secondary and a primary fitting. So here you see the graph of both. This, even from archaeological point of view, seems to be too short for the development, for instance, of pottery, of gold metallurgy, also the copper items. So we would prefer this second or primary fit here, which shows a distribution of the data along the calibration curve in this way. And that's actually our final result. Unfortunately, you cannot see the head of this graph here, but this is, we used here equilenk phases. These are our 6 formulated phases. Here you see the C14 data. And surprisingly, so we have here a very high dates, and it goes very low, again high, again low, again high. But this more or less, and this was really new for us, corresponds actually to that what we see in the dendrochronological data. So here we have the raw data. Bernie can talk more about this of the Belfast, Heidelberg, and Seattle dendro labs, and you see the data making these problems. So if you have just a single date, and it was Javor Boyagiev permanently states for the late Bulgarian Chalcolithic, they are the same. They have the same radiocarbon age like for the beginning of the copper age. So actually, without this methodology, using here correspondence analysis and then later putting on the C14 data, we cannot achieve a sustainable chronology. It's purely impossible in this area here, in this time interval. So what we achieved then is a kind of territorial development of the cemetery. And to make it a bit more clear, Clemens used here also the center of the distribution. And you could see here it develops more or less from the north to the south. That means from the higher positions here on the hill towards the Varna Lake. And this line here in front with all the gold items should be more or less the end of the cemetery. So consequences, just very briefly, what we can learn from the Varna cemetery. So we see the introduction of gold metallurgy here. So gold was already present in this grave group, which is preceding the Varna grave group, the Varna II group. So at the beginning, we have here use of copper adornments, and they diminish within time. And here you can see at the beginning, we have only copper items here. And this is Kupferschmuck here, copper here at the beginning. And this is replaced then by gold. This is also a symbolic aspect which can be seen there, because at the end are clustering the symbolic graves. And they're very rich in gold adornments. In a few cases, we can see one and the same piece of jewelry, first in copper and then imitated in gold. So according to the tools, we can see also how this antler holes, which we have here in the grave 1, are replaced by metal items. So they are very, very functional. So antler is very flexible, can be very good used for producing such holes, for really using them. But at a certain stage, we can see here metal is coming in and replaces these implements from organic material. So, and then when it comes to the stone implements, we can see here the super blades, they are dominating here at the beginning. So we have an introductory phase where there are just a few, but then there's a big peak, and then they yeah, so they, flint is still in use, but he's seen the super blades, yeah, they're increasing, yeah. This is very, very interesting within time. So this goes together with the gold richness here in the grave. So the super blades are something which runs parallel here, the development of super blades with the gold jewelry. On the other hand, the real axes here, they were used at the beginning, and with the metal implements, they are disappearing. So here we have a graph of Alexander Wulpe of one of the PDF volumes, where you have it in a nutshell, actually. Here the beginning with the Plochnik axis, and then these elaborated shapes, and the Varna cemetery more or less covers this beginning development of copper implements. So if you put it together, it starts here with a few awls or needles, axes which more or less look like still like stone axes. Then they are getting more hybrid, yeah, and phase 3, 4, and then you see at the end people learned to deal with this new kind of material and produce weapons which you cannot easily imagine in stone. So with the pottery, here we have the pottery of the Varna 2 group, which belongs here to the beginning, and then it runs here through the periods. And for me, it was a very nice observation that it fits more or less to that what Henrietta Todorova, together with his son, her son, Ivan Weissov, published here for the Durankulak cemetery. You see here Hamanja 4, yeah, more or less the same types like here, and then Varna 1, 2, 3. I mean, this is not Varna cemetery, this is just Varna group. You see here this development. Here the protuberances get longer, and the same we have here in our Varna cemetery, according to our chronology. Yeah, so then the students did a lot of spatial studies here, network analysis. Here just a graph which shows how the richest grave, 43, is connected with the other graves in the cemetery. The same we can do along the correspondence analysis, and we see how this guy is connected to the other graves. And we can try to translate this into, yeah, let's say, tribal relationships or even family relationships. And I like very much these observations here on Balinese technomony from Clifford Geertz, published already here in German in '83. The work was done mainly in the 70s. Yeah, so that a personality understands itself because of his ancestors, and that could be the case here also in the Varna cemetery if we talk about these items and their interconnectiveness with the other graves. And now we open a new chapter with a genetic analysis, and again I have to say that we have the filter with the data. Only the rich graves with lots of metal items provide material for genetic analysis, yeah. But even though it's interesting, and you see here within this line of graves, yeah, which we see as more or less contemporaneous, we have this interrelatedness here, and we are talking here about ancestry, yeah. So these are cousins, 3rd grade, yeah. And here with our rich grave, 43, it's also interconnected with a few graves which are here in the lower line, and the same we can see here in this image on our correspondence analysis. So thanks again for the invitation, and I'm ready for your questions.
Thank you very much, Raiko. Do we have any questions from the floor or online?
I have some questions. It was very interesting, your paper. Thank you very much. You explained a lot of things and methodology also. I would like to ask about your method, especially after the polynomial fitting, the calpal. What exactly is factor 1? Is it a principal component?
No, it's just so if you make a correspondence analysis, actually it's a 3D cloud. Yeah, and the factor 1 is one axis we have within the space. Yeah, that's to put it simply. Yeah, and the factor 1 is that line, so you can choose in the program how to project this thing, and this is the line which gives the horizontal distribution of the dots within the cloud.
So factor 1 in fact gave you the subphasing this analysis. The phases that how were the phases formed?
So yeah, okay. So the first thing is that it's too complicated to look through the cloud. So actually we can rotate the cloud and we can define the phases within the cloud itself, but it's more easy to project it on a plane, yeah, so that we have only 2 dimensions, and then to define optically, just macroscopically, the gaps. But as you saw, Clemens also did it by the distribution of points within the phases. Yeah. So
we use the gaps.
Gaps, exactly. Mm-hmm.
And excuse me, one more. The 3 earlier graves, where do they fall in this dating, in this relative
yeah,
phases?
I can
3 earlier graves.
I can go back to the graph
because
here.
As far as I remember from your paper, and this is why I actually make the question, they fall in phase 4.
No, actually they fall here at the beginning. So here, and the problem is that we how is it in German, to compare pears with apples? Yeah. So the problem is that they are not identical. The items which come from the Varna cemetery, but a few aspects from the Varna 2 grave group. There are these 3 graves here. They are comparable, and especially with the older graves here, and they should belong to the first or maximum the second phase of our development. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Now, any more questions? No questions online at the moment. It was a fascinating talk. I mean, very complicated and an amazing way of dealing with all the data. Thank you very much.
There was another question.
Sorry, here we are.
Just a question for the beginning of your material. Do you have any? Are all were all the tombs intact, or was tomb robbery a question that you had to take into account?
Tomb robbery is also documented, but it's not a big problem because it's not affecting the majority of the graves. The main thing was some kind of rituals within that burial community, let's say, because the observation still from Ivan Ivanov, from the old excavator who died in the early 2000s, was that there are some reburials. And we always doubted this. We thought, maybe this is also a taphonomical thing. And so, but now Vladimir Slavchev, the new custodian, who is responsible for these finds, renewed the excavation. And that's exactly what he could observe. So within this development, and we are talking here about 240, 250 years, there's going on lots of stuff of taking out stuff from the graves, reburying and so on. And this is something we have to think about, as we were denying it till recently, so it was not a problem, but now with the new observations, so we have to think also on this. And the main problem is the preservation, the bone preservation, for instance. So in many cases, we can even not see what kind of grave is it? Is it a hawker grave to the left, to the right, or a supine one, or a symbolic grave? Yeah.
Diamant Spanagitopoulos, thank you very much for this impressive talk. I tried to understand the approach. I didn't get everything, but I was very much impressed. My one question is, you have mentioned at the beginning that you defined a lot of criteria for this statistical analysis, more than 160, I cannot remember the figure in the first table. And I can imagine that there were not only quantitative but also qualitative criteria. And the first question is whether there is any possibility to calibrate quantitative criteria by means of qualitative criteria or vice versa. Another question, you mentioned the number of gold objects within tombs, and some of them had a very impressive figure, 800, 1000. Does weight play a role? Because if you have even 1000 of tiny beads that weight less than 1 kilo, can you compare it with one very heavy gold object? Does it make a difference for your statistical evaluation?
Yes, thank you for your question, because this is actually the crucial point. Yeah? So this is the problem with the Varna cemetery. To put it easy, you can just extract the symbolic or the deposition 36 with these 860 items and grave 43 where they are over 1000. This is easy. So because they are extraordinary, and if you put them out and run a seriation without them, it makes an effect already, because there you see it's more or less than equally distributed. And so this is one possibility, but we tried this as well, but at a certain stage we said, why not? So let's see what is going on there. And if you go on this binarization, presence absence relations, then you can try as well, because it is only significant if there's one new item from a specific type in the grave or not. There are several other difficulties because there are lots of representatives of single types in these rich graves, and then you again have the problem. But you have to decide then during the process of the filtering. That's why the filtering is very, very important here, because of this unequal distribution. Totally right. But the idea, and so the main problem was that we had at the beginning, we had only C14 data from the richest graves because of this bias with the preservation of the bones. And that's why there was published this very early paper by Tam Hayam and colleagues, which is excellent because it was putting the chronology at the right point. So before it was thought that it's much younger, the cemetery. But one thing was wrong in this paper. They thought that these graves are at the beginning of the cemetery. And what we can see now, because of this analysis, that actually they belong to the end. And if you understand grave 43 with these over 1000 single pieces of gold items as something at the end, then why to exclude it? Because you can have an idea about what previously was in use, and then the dating of the grave goes then in a very traditional way since Oscar Montelius with the last item. So the final coin makes the date. And that's why for us at the end of the day, after all this work we have done, we decided to include it there, because if it's at the end, or more the last real grave, so I was not talking much about this symbolic aspects and so, but what we see is after they buried this very important personality, there are almost only symbolical graves on this. Yeah. And to come a bit more into your language, it might be the same what already Schliemann and guys after him observed at Mycenae, yeah, that we have this grave circle, which at a certain time was sacralized, yeah, by including it into the walls of the town and doing all these rituals on there. Maybe the same happened here, yeah, and that's why we have this richness with gold objects and symbolical graves, even statues which are buried there. And that's why do the one thing, sort of chronology, but also this social and symbolic aspects we have to take into consideration, because they tell us something about the actions which happened at the end of the use of this place. Yeah.
Thanks very much. There's a question online. It's funny, I was just thinking about Italy. And actually, can I ask one question before I present this one? And that is, do you know of other cemeteries in Southern Europe and the Aegean where this kind of analysis is being undertaken? I was thinking some of the cemeteries, for instance, in Etruscan Italy, where there's very good horizontal stratigraphy.
Yeah.
Quattro Fontanili, and that's Iron Age, of course, but it doesn't matter. The point is the. Yeah.
I know that for the Bronze Age, it was done several times on the graveyard of Kârna in southern Romania. Christiane Reich was the last. Dumitrescu published it, and there was lots of ideas about this horizontal development. And then within this time span, with the graveyard of Duranculac, Weisser said that they have done it, but the methodology was not really properly published. They just gave the results, so a chronology as God-given. Yeah, so let's say. But interestingly, one of the PhD students of Sven Brumak, I think he did it then, yeah, with the Duranculac cemetery, which starts a bit earlier than Varna, and it has over 1,000 graves and a longer time span. And actually, he did correspondence analysis and seriation. But as far as I know, he did not yet confront them with the C14 data. That could still be done.
Well, the time span is obviously important. Here from Luca Girella in Italy. Congratulations for the presentation. Did I understand well that the highest probability of use of the cemetery is just over 1 century? Considering the high number of graves, this short time span of use is very fascinating. Many thanks.
Yeah, let me go again to my presentation. So, sorry, I can. Yes, it's actually longer. It's not 1 century here, because what we see here is actually from 4,600 to 4,340. Yeah, so it's 240 years. Yeah, it's longer.
Okay, thank you. Right, no, thanks very much. And